Okay, folks, this is the drill. I'm Ron. Welcome to Story Time. Facile formulas, catchy slogans, 10-step programs, and quick fixes too often dominate today's management training programs. But in organizations, as in all of life, human behavior is seldom predictable, and business dilemmas do not easily lend themselves to gimmicks or simplistic answers. In Management of the Absurd, psychologist, educator, and former CEO Richard Farson presents a series of management paradoxes designed to challenge conventional wisdom and encourage managers to re examine their assumptions about effective leadership. And today we're in on actually part two, and part two is made up of chapters 3 and 4. And we're on chapter 4. Once you find a management technique that works, give it up. Each new human relations technique always promises to make the leader more effective. Managers who are taught to listen non judgmentally or to reward certain behaviors in others may initially feel that they have found the answer. At last, something that works. But the feeling seldom lasts. Over time, they usually discover that their newfound techniques are actually working to prevent closer human relationships, just the opposite of their intended effect. The most obvious reason is that any technique loses its power when it becomes evident that it is a technique. Don't listen to me that way. Don't treat me as if you were my therapist. I see what you're doing. Are you rewarding me now? And ostensibly, those are all examples of techniques or the responses to various types of techniques. A couple of things about this is that feeling is not the issue isn't about feelings. It's really about effectiveness. And it's also, you got to remember that the management isn't about forging closer human relationships. Management, supervision, and leadership are all about accomplishing a mission, getting work done, helping to make a profit for whatever company you happen to be working for. That's what it's for. So, as we saw in the previous chapter's examples from parenthood and management, most techniques derive their power from the context in which they are used. That is, if they are in contrast to the way things are usually done. If a manager rarely pays attention to an employee and then begins to pay attention to an employee, and then begins to do so, the effect is quite dramatic. But if the manager is regularly attentive, the attention loses its power because it's not contrasted with its opposite. And again, it's not an issue of power. It's, again, an issue of right and wrong. And you're paying attention to an employee not for its emotional or psychological effect. You're paying attention to an employee in order to monitor their work and make sure that they're getting what they're supposed to get done and getting it done on time. It's called supervision as part of being a manager as well. Techniques consciously employed to communicate one kind of feeling may be undone by deep-seated and contradictory feelings that are unconsciously transmitted at the same time. The resulting mixed message confuses and disturbs the recipient. It is ineffective to try to send messages that communicate firmness, affection, or interest when the opposite feelings are closer to the truth. And again, it's got little or nothing to do with feelings and has to do with reality. It has to do with what is it that needs to be done and making sure that it gets done. That's what the manager's job is. And you use various types of techniques in order to do that. Setting limits, for instance. Go this far but no further. For instance, with salespeople. Salespeople may end up having, if they're out taking people to lunch, prospective clients and whatnot to lunch, then they may very well end up having a budget as a kind of a limit, saying that you don't want to overspend and end up putting the company into big debt in order to try to get clients. Some managers seem to spend their lives trying to discover techniques that will produce desired behaviors in employees without the employees being aware of them. This is a high-risk approach that will likely end with the managers losing respect for and confidence in their employees. Let me explain. Assume that I have knowledge about certain techniques, but my employees lack that knowledge. My compassion for them will almost certainly erode if I succeed in using that knowledge to change their behavior in some way, for they will have been fooled, and I cannot help but lose some respect for them as a result. The situation is only worsened if I think I should be able to handle these people, but can't, which, of course, is usually the case. Carl Rogers was perhaps the first to articulate this problem. He knew that when a therapist thought he or she could handle a client, an invisible erosion of respect began. To be truly effective, the therapist had to respect the client and had to be open to whatever might happen. The same is true in management. It is the ability to meet each situation armed not with a battery of techniques, but with openness that permits a genuine response. The better managers transcend technique. Having acquired many techniques in their development as professionals, they succeed precisely by leaving technique behind. And again, it's false because it has nothing to do with the psychological development or well-being of your employees, but it has to do with the needs of the company that you're working for. You use various types of techniques and whatnot. Sometimes you're going to use a particular type of management technique because the law says you must do so, and company policy says you must do so. Let's say in the case of discrimination, you have to, if you're going to go out and put out a message about hiring, for instance, and you have to put it out, it has to be widely available. It cannot be just limited to one or two different sources. You have to make it as widely available as possible so that you're going to be able to attract the most diverse group of employees possible. And that's a technique. But the technique is in support not of and isn't supposed to fool the potential employees, the applicants. It's meant to help the company hire quality employees, number one, and number two, stay within the law while doing so. Those are concrete, realistic objectives. And again, that's what management technique is all about. Let's see, what else we got here? Feelings discovered. One of the most useful ideas to remember is that what we might call the reciprocity rule of human behavior, that over time people come to share reciprocally similar attitudes towards each other. That is, if I have a low opinion of you, then while you may for a time hold a high opinion of me, it is unlikely that your high opinion will persist. Eventually you will come to feel about me the way I feel about you. That's another of the snares of the technology of human relations. We believe that we can acquire techniques that will hide our true feelings about people and enable us to convey an image of ourselves which they will respect even though we do not respect them. We think, for example, that by learning a communication technique, we can gain control over what we are communicating. All this is nothing short of self-deception, I'm afraid. Ultimately, people discover who we are and come to regard us as we regard them. If we genuinely respect our colleagues and employees, those feelings will be communicated without the need for artifice or technique, and they will be reciprocated. And again, it's back into the idea, the objective in business being psychological, and it's not so. The objective in business is financial and realistic. And so I don't understand where he gets the idea that we believe we can acquire techniques that'll hide our true feelings about people and enable us to convey an image of ourselves which they will respect, even though we don't respect them. One of the things about being a manager is that you're going to have respect for people that you hire and that you find to be quality individuals. If you have people that you don't respect, those people are going to receive the appropriate disciplinary action up to and including termination. It's, this is not like being in business is not the same thing as having a family. If you're a brother or sister and you're living at home with mom and dad and you're stuck with each other, okay, so the issues there of reciprocity and having respect for one another may have certain amount of validity to it. But in a business environment in which people are not stuck with each other, they can resign and they can be fired as well as hired, then it becomes the aims of the company that become paramount, and the psychological issues of the employees or the managers, for that matter, are rather irrelevant. So, coming up on tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on the 22nd, today being Saturday, September the 21st, tomorrow the 22nd, is going to be Chapter 5. Effective managers are not in control. So we'll be tackling that and basically debunking it. Most of this book, it seems to me, is going to be about, since the guy was a psychologist, it seems that he just looks at the world through the prism of psychology. Everything has a psychological component to it, and that seems to loom large in the way he looks at the world. Unfortunately, for him, reality exists, and existence is primary, and so that's the way you have to look at things. First and foremost is realistically. So tomorrow it's going to be Chapter 5, and until then, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.